Behind the Attic Wall, Chapter 8. She should have been sent to some boarding school, Aunt Lillian had said. She's impossible to handle. To handle? Handle was what you did to the smooth knob on the bedpost when you slipped your palm across it. Handle was what you did to the china lace skirt on the ballerina in the curio cabinet, to the gold chain necklace with its single red stone, to the silver satin slippers standing side by side on the closet floor. Was she impossible to handle? Experimentally, she ran her fingers along her cheek as though it were the smooth satin skin of a silver slipper, and let a rope of her wet brown hair collect in her cupped hand like a chain of golden links. She squeezed her forearm as though it were the rubber limb of a doll, and, with her thumb, whitened sections of the pale blue vein that ran like a river from her wrist to her elbow. Was she impossible to handle? But of course her aunt didn't mean handle like that at all. She meant Maggie was impossible to control. She meant Maggie was fresh, nasty, mean, disobedient, willful, rebellious, thieving, all those things she had been called by people who had to look after her. She meant that within an hour somebody was going to come up to Maggie's room and tell her to pack her things because she would have to leave. Where would they send her? That was probably what they were deciding right now. At this very moment, while Maggie pressed the vein in her arm, watching it whiten and darken in turn, her two aunts and her uncle were downstairs deciding among themselves where she should next be sent. "There are places for children like you," one headmistress had warned her. Kids' jail is what the other children called such places. Maggie's going to kids' jail. Is that where her aunts and uncle would send her now? Kids' jail? She put a strand of hair in her mouth and reached into the drawer of the little writing table, extracting from it her battered deck of cards, gray, sticky, and uneven in their stretched-out rubber band. One by one, she laid them out on her bed. Solitaire was the only card game she played. Some roommate had taught her how. "It's a game you play all by yourself," the girl had explained. And Maggie had stood by and watched in growing fascination as the rows of cards were counted out, face up and face down on that faraway dormitory floor. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4. The patterns were wonderful. Red on black, black on red. Red, black, red, black, red. As soon as she had mastered the rules, she had played it all the rest of that distant afternoon. Alone in her room, soon it became her principal pastime, and when she closed her eyes at night, double-torsoed kings, queens, and jacks would file in solemn procession in the darkness behind her lids. Their families of 10s and 9s, 8s and 7s, black, red, all marching in tight order close behind. Now the cards were dealt out across the bedspread, and she paused to listen for the voices of her aunts and uncle, planning her future from somewhere downstairs, in the parlor maybe, or around that long dining table. Noiselessly she went to the door and opened it an inch. The hallway was a long, dark tunnel, thick with silence. No board creaked, no whisper came, and Maggie closed the door again, returning to the silent cards, the silent walls, the silent bed. If this place wasn't a boarding school, then why was there a plaque on the front entrance saying it was? And who had slept in these rooms with their boarding school beds and writing desks? Who, for that matter, had used the schoolroom? What was this place, anyway? Red, black, red, black. "These are cards," she explained to the backwoods girls, who had suddenly appeared at her bedside. "Here, I'll tell you their names. This one is called Queen of Hearts, and this one is Ace of Diamonds." "Oh, how wonderful!" they said. "How do you remember them all?" "It's easy," Maggie answered. "I can remember anything." And she continued laying out the cards, red on black, black on red. "Look, here's how to play." Kids' jail, she thought. What were those places like? Gray and old, probably, like the building she was in now, and filled with children like her, all impossible to handle, all crowded into tiny rooms, cells, and all watched from morning until night by women in white uniforms, matrons. The light entering the window was fading now, and she squinted at the pale kings and queens lined up on the bed. It was growing late, and no one had come up to tell her to pack her things. Maybe instead of sending her away, her aunts would simply punish her. How, she wondered. You could always size up a headmistress by the way she punished. The ones who knew what they were about and weren't afraid of you gave you a stinging slap across your face and called you some sort of name. Brat, usually. The other ones, who were afraid of you, or who were afraid you would get the better of them, shouted all over the place and sent you to your room, or made you miss recess for a week, or desserts, or television, or whatever everyone else could have. It never much mattered to Maggie. She hated recess. Everybody always crowded around the television screen, so she couldn't see it anyway, and the desserts were usually pudding. The worst kind of headmistress was the one who didn't punish at all, who didn't even get angry. Maggie isn't feeling cooperative today, she would explain in a pleasant voice to someone whose knees you had just kicked in. Then she would take you to her office and make you sit next to her while she told you how wonderful you were and how much you'd grown. Not grown taller, more mature. You've become much more mature, Maggie, and we are all proud of your development. Then there'd be a lecture on how even though Maggie had grown so mature, she still had to work on expressing her anger in more constructive ways. But Maggie wouldn't be listening. Instead, she'd be staring at the leather appointment book on the desk and figuring out a way to slide it under her arm and out the door. For a diary. She could write things in a diary, and somehow keep the days from being lost, one after another. She could tell what she had done each hour. 7 a.m., got up, brushed teeth, got dressed. It was growing late. There was no color left at all in the garden, and a star appeared just above the crown of birch branches. Suddenly there was a rustle at her door, and Maggie froze. They were coming for her at last. They had made up their minds, and now she would be told to pack her things and slide off the bed. A small shower of cards slid off with her, coming to rest. She slid off the bed. A small shower of cards slid off with her, coming to rest, like silent leaves from a shaken branch against her feet. She faced the door, waiting for the knob to turn, or the frame of a quiver at the knock, or the frame to quiver at a knock. But she heard only the clatter of something being settled on the floor, and then quick retreating footsteps. When the hall was silent again, she opened the door a crack and stared down at a supper tray. A bowl of soup, a sandwich, and a glass of milk, its rim of bubbles not yet broken. Carefully she closed the door and returned to her bed. "This," she said to the backwoods girls, "is a bed." "Oh, what's a bed?" "It's to sleep on, dummies. I don't sleep on the floor the way you do. I have a bed all to myself. I have this whole room to myself, in fact. Everything in it is mine to keep for as long as I like." And she closed the curtains so that no light at all entered the room, and now she knew would be hers for what might be a long while. And that is the end of chapter 8.